The NBA has plenty of institutional problems this season. The referees are inserting themselves as main characters of every other game. Bench players are gambling on their garbage time rebounds. Racism is at the top of the league standings. And maybe most troubling of all, Doc Rivers is back somehow.
Everybody seems happy, but except for me.
I think the main issue is the extreme imbalance between the good teams and the poverty teams. It's gotten to the point that the product should be considered false advertising. Imagine buying a ticket to see a basketball game between the Miami Heat and the Portland Trail Blazers, but instead of a high-quality basketball game, you become a witness to an abomination with systemic and oppressive inequality running rampant in the league. The necessary course of action is evident. We must establish communism in the NBA. You might say, wait a minute, isn't the NBA already communist? Putting aside LeBron, the league does have measures in place to protect competitive balance and to ensure that winning gets distributed evenly. The salary cap limits teams to spend roughly equal amounts on player salaries, and the draft forces the best young basketball players to play for the worst teams. Despite this, the NBA has not become the idealized socialist utopia it should be. There are still multiple tanking masterclasses being performed this year, even though the consensus is that this draft isn't worth tanking for. A well-known objective measure of inequality is the Jontay Index. This is a score that measures a country's income inequality, and the NBA's Jontay Index this season is just under 18. This is more than double the Jontay Index of the 2023 MLB season, and that's a league where some owners give out literal billion-dollar contracts to individual players, and other owners act like they're as broke as you or me. For reference, the Jontay Index of the US economy is 39.82. It's reasonable to conclude that being poor in America is more than twice as hopeless as the Detroit Pistons. So we've already tried socialist policies in the NBA, but the usual poverty franchises remain as shambolic as ever, and parity is at an all-time low. When you've tried a little communism and it doesn't work out, do you know what you need? That's right, even more communism. Now just imagine if the proletariat teams of the NBA forcibly instituted wealth redistribution and forced the good teams to trade their good players for the basketball terrorists on the bad teams. That's exactly what this video is. I calculated the mathematically optimal trades for each of the 30 NBA teams to hopefully achieve communism in the NBA. I'm not going to go too deep into the nerdy stuff, but here's a brief description of the methodology I used. I iterated through all the possible trade legal pairs of players on opposite teams that have a disparity in win shares so that when they're swapped, it results in the greatest reduction in the league's Jontay Index. After the best trade is determined, I mark that down and remove the two teams involved from consideration for the next round, so all teams can be included, and I then repeat the algorithm. I also limited this to count only players with over 500 minutes played, so we're not allowed to trade Jokic for Thanasis Antetokounmpo, because that would just be unfair to the Bucks.
Bad sign, I'm in London, I pass by on the grey line.
This trade is the absolute pinnacle for this forcible redistribution exercise. Take a good player from a good team and trade them for the worst player possible on the worst team possible, where you can still match the salaries up. The recent history of these two teams could not be more opposite. The Thunder are the poster boys for the success of tanking and accumulating draft picks, and the Wizards have been ass for the better half of a decade, but their highest draft pick since 2014 was just the 8th pick.
I'm in London, I pass by on the grey line.
Well, Scoot Henderson is kind of like Anthony Edwards. If you made him a bit less athletic, a much worse shooter, took away his defensive abilities, and made him a couple inches shorter. Right now, it's too early to tell how good Scoot will eventually be, but to even call him a great value version of Ant would be insulting to both Anthony Edwards and the Walmart Corporation. At least we know that pro-choice advocate Anthony Edwards would fit right in living in Portland.
That's a bad sign. I'm in London, I pass by on the grey line.
Dang. The whole purpose of this exercise was to help the poverty teams, but we ended up oppressing Charlotte and Detroit even more. Just like real communism. These trades occur due to the methodology. We're using win shares to measure player quality, and Pistons and Hornets players have their win shares artificially depressed because their teams are so bad that there aren't enough wins to share to generate win shares. The more tragic thing about these trades is that Charlotte and Detroit are managed with such incompetence that these might be the most realistic trades in this video.
I'm in London, I pass by on the grey line.
The Knicks finally have something to root for, something to be hopeful for in Jalen Brunson. And we're just taking him away with the same cruelty that Stalin took away that grain from those Ukrainian peasants. At least now that they're on separate teams, maybe we could get the Bruce Brown, Grady Dick jersey swap that we all need in our lives.
That's a bad sign. I'm in London, I pass by on the grey line.
You know that one meme that epitomizes this Spurs season, where it's Wembanyama being like, I'm 7'4", pass me the ball, and the other Spurs think that they're the main characters in the game? This would solve that immediately. Imagine, arguably the best playmaking point guard in the league with Wemby. Adam Silver, this is exactly what you pay your scriptwriters for. We need this trade to happen in the offseason. Now that I'm done going over the most impoverished teams, here are the trades I calculated for the rest of the league. Did we learn anything with this exercise? No. Did we accomplish anything with inventing these hypothetical trades? Absolutely not. If implemented, would these trades make the league better? Listen, if you remember, we gave Brandon Miller to the Celtics, and we somehow made the Pistons even worse. This outcome certainly was not covered in any Marxist theory I've read, so it's possible that communism is not the solution to the NBA's problems.
Have got to say no to xenophobia and to racism.